Hey guys, it's Mary Rose. Happy Wednesday. It's November. It's a brisk chill in the air. Perhaps you've been jumping in a pile of leaves today. I hope so. Before I get into our discussion today, which I warn you now is not going to be for the faint of heart, it is my top 10 observations of the things that hold writers back from success. So, before we get into that, shake it off, take some deep breaths. And if you're watching on Facebook, welcome. There's a little trick that you can do. You can go to streamyard.com/Facebook, which is actually linked right above where you're watching the video. You can click on it. And what that means is if you leave a comment, and I hope you will, that I'll be able to see your name. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. It's so good to have you guys here. I'm going to open up the comment box already. Waving hello to Cynthia, waving hello to Terry, waving hello to Facebook user. So I don't know who you are, but if you said hello and you're Facebook user, just know that I don't quite know who you are. Although, I could take a guess. I could imagine you as being anyone. That's kind of exciting. And let me wave a special hello to my Facebook user from Tunisia. Hello, Tunisia. It's so nice to have you here. It truly is one of the I was going to say miracles. It feels like a miracle, doesn't it? But it's one of the wonders of this technology that we can connect in this incredible way. And I appreciate it because I love to teach, and I've been teaching a long time. And it's an astonishing privilege to be able to get on this live stream every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is what I do, and just share some thoughts about writing craft, story structure, the path of the thriving working writer, and spread a little mentorship your way. So in case you're new here, I'm Mary Rose Wood. I am an author, and I'm best known for my middle grade fiction. My most recent book is called Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale, and it's up there on this shelf in front of me. And I'm thinking about it a lot, not only because I'm proud of it, but because it's harvest season, Thanksgiving's coming, and so much about that the tale of Alice's Farm has to do with this cycle of nature and the climactic season of the harvest. It's a fun little book. It's my 21st century Charlotte's Web. So if you're thinking along those lines as well, it's something that you might want to pick up and read this month. Now, I like telling you about my work and as a writer because I like it and I'm proud of it. But I also want you to know where my opinions come from. There's a lot of writing advice all over the internet, all over the world, at all the conferences, at all the classes, all the programs. There's a lot. Some of it is going to contradict each other, right? You're not always going to hear the same thing from people who get up in front of a microphone and say, let me preach to you about good fiction writing. My take on this comes from my long experience as a storyteller. I've been in the arts my whole life. I started out in the theater, in the narrative arts of the theater, and then I pivoted into writing fiction at a later point and have found my home here. So I've been writing fiction, I guess it's coming up on 20 years. That's kind of a dizzying thing. Alice's Farm is my 14th novel, published by one of the big 5 publishers. And I've been teaching for a long time as well. And what that gives me is a sense of not how all unhappy writers are different, to quote the great Russian novelist, that all unhappy writers are actually struggling with difficulties that fall into certain categories. There's a pattern to it. We all have to do the same kinds of things when we're learning. And this is not meant to make you feel not special, because you are special. Your writing is special. Your voice needs to be heard. What I want it to make you feel like is that any obstacles that you're hitting are just normal parts of the path. It's just normal stuff that you have to learn when you are on a process of growth toward mastery. So it's a way of knowing that it's not about you. It's not something to do with discipline or talent or gifts or, you're learning. And so if I'm about to say something on my list of the top 10 things that hold writers back from success, that rings a bell with you, I don't want you to feel called out and like, "Oh no, I was on her top 10 list. That's bad news." No, it's actually good news. Let me reframe this for you in advance. I want you to feel like, aha, I'm just making the usual beginner mistakes. That's easy to fix. Okay. So just promise me out there that you're going to take that approach. Put that happy filter on your ears so that I can be open and tell you what I have seen so often in my teaching and of course in my own development as an artist. That's important to say as well. I'm a better writer now than I was 20 years ago. There's no question. I've been doing it a while. I've been putting my work out into the world, getting feedback, learning, reading, studying. I've been doing all the things. One of the things that's taught me the most, and I say this with an open heart and such sincere gratitude to my students, is the privilege of working with you, because you are so open and you share your work and we work through your struggles together. And each time I am reminded afresh of all the things that we can learn as writers that will make our work level up again and again and work better for the reader. That's what we're here for. Okay. So now I hope I've given everyone a virtual hug. I hope you're feeling it. Let's dive in, because 10 is 10 things. And I can go on a bit. So I'm going to try and be succinct. While I'm speaking, please feel free to engage in the comments, add your observations, say an amen, throw in a question if you want me to weave it into the discussion. This is a live stream and it's interactive, and I love having all of you here. I'm very grateful that you take the time to come. All right, I'm going to do this New Year's Eve countdown style. We're going to start with number 10, okay? Number 10 on my top 10 list of things that hold writers back from success. Number 10, you're still thinking like a reader. You're still thinking like a reader. Now, let's unpack that a bit. If writing well means you're not thinking like a reader, who are you thinking like? Guess what? You're thinking like a writer. It's a rather different experience, isn't it? When you're a reader, and I know that you are, because you wouldn't dream of writing or you wouldn't be actively engaged in the pursuit of writing if reading wasn't something special in your life. You get to sit down with a book that is already in hard covers and open it up and turn the pages, and it does not require a lot of planning on your part. What it does require is a kind of softness on your part. And what I mean by that is that it requires you to turn over the control of your own consciousness, as we say in the Path of the Storyteller program, which is where I teach and mentor writers. You hand over the keys to the car of consciousness to the author of the work that you're reading. You surrender a little bit. That's what I mean by bringing a kind of a softness to the experience of reading. You surrender to it. You go on the ride. If you want to get all literary about it, you suspend your disbelief. Okay. Now, that is part of what makes reading a joy and entertaining and captivating. It's transporting in a literal sense, right? When we get lost in a book, we are transported into the world of the book. But that type of softness and surrender and letting the book lead you is not that helpful to you as a writer. And I see this over and over again with people who come to me and say, okay, I'm writing. They speak in the language of readers. They feel kind of helpless in the face of their own books. They write stuff and they don't know why they wrote it or how it came out or what exactly it means. They stand at a kind of an awestruck distance, like, I don't know, it just came out that way. So the cure for, thinking like a reader is to really understand what a writer's job is. Put on that writer hat, be the boss of your book and your process, and start to think like a writer. Speaking of process, one of the difficulties of thinking like a reader, and listen, we all do it early on because we start out as readers. This is it's kind of a shift of identity that we have to make, thinking like a reader versus thinking like a writer. If you think like a reader, it gives you a very, very unrealistic idea of what the process of writing is like. You think that the process of writing is far more like the process of reading than it is. And it's not. The process of writing, it's as if the finished book on the shelf that the reader enjoys is the tip of an iceberg. What's on the page of that finished book is the tip of an iceberg. But that tip is so fully imagined that it's the part that the reader can't see on the page that is actually making this transportive experience work, right? If we read and we see the tip of the iceberg and we sit down to write and we write the tip of the iceberg, we wonder why our writing doesn't work. It's because we're not even aware of the iceberg underneath. We don't know what we don't know. Okay, so that's number 10. You're still thinking like a reader. Think like a writer instead. I'm going to move to number 9 now. Now listen. Remember what I said. This is a warm hug of encouragement that I'm giving you. Number 9 of my top 10 reasons of things top 10 things that hold writers back. You're trying to write your masterpiece first. Now, I see this a lot, and there are red flags that sometimes indicate to me that I have in front of me someone who's trying to write their masterpiece first. One of those red flags is if they've been working on one book for more than, say, 3 or 4 years. And you would be shocked and amazed, or perhaps you wouldn't, that there are folks out there who are on the path to, learning how to write with mastery. They are very serious. These are actually often very serious writers. So as always, I say this with tremendous appreciation for the effort and the ambition. These are people who really want to do it. They want to have careers as writers. They want to get published. But they've been working on the same book for 3 or 4 years. They've been in and out of workshops with this book. They went into an MFA program to work on this book. 2 years later, they came out with like a box of notes that they got from all the different mentors that they've worked with on this book. Maybe they pay for a manuscript critique on this book. It's like they just won't let it die. They've been working on something for so long, and it's not really getting them there. And I will inquire. This will make me curious. I'll be, okay, well, tell me about it. And what quickly becomes evident is that this is the book that they want to win the prize for at the end of their career. Like this is the one that they have this vision for that's going to be the culmination of, right? This is it. This is the equivalent of the Book Academy Awards, whatever that means to you, because it means different things to different people. That's it. They've got this vision. This is their book. This is their thing. This is their great white whale. Captain Ahab this is not a good place to be in, the Captain Ahab head. What are the odds? Let's just put down all the feelings that I just stirred up in some of you, right? What are the odds that you are going to write your masterpiece first? They are very slim. You are going to write a lot of things. If you're serious about writing, and I know you are, or you wouldn't be here, you're going to write a lot of things. The first few things you write are not going to be your best work. They're going to be your baby pictures. They're going to be your early work. That's normal. Is that something to be ashamed of? Obviously not. Obviously not. How do we get to the place where we have enough mastery to actually write our masterpiece? We have to write the baby work first. We have to have some training wheels on the bike for a while. We have to go on the path of learning and improvement in order to get to the place where we can write our masterpiece. It's not going to be our first book. Now, here's the other thing that comes up. This masterpiece is sometimes something so deeply personal that it really feels like they're on fire to write this book. And I want to tell you, it's very common for I have this. I was just talking to a writer friend recently, extremely successful writer friend. You've heard of him, about what he's working on next. And Neil Gaiman, who's not a writer friend, alas, perhaps someday he will be, also famously tells a story about this, that we have a list of books we want to write in our lifetimes. It's not that we have an idea, we have to sit down and write it that day. We go back to the ideas that have been brewing. Right? I have ideas for books that have been sitting around for years. I haven't written them yet. I will know when the time is right to write them. It's part of the dance of a life as an artist, right? You write the book that's the right book for you to write next. Just because you have an idea for your masterpiece and you think you know what it's going to be doesn't mean you have to write it as your first work. You can save it for later. The story that Neil Gaiman tells particularly is about a very successful middle grade novel that he wrote that's wonderful called The Graveyard Book. He got the idea for writing The Graveyard Book when he was a young father, and he was watching his child riding a tricycle around, and apparently where they lived in England at the time, the best place for the kid to ride the bike was the local cemetery. And so he used to watch his kid practicing riding the tricycle around the graveyard, and he got the idea to do a retelling of Mowgli in the Jungle Book, Kipling's The Jungle Book, but set in a graveyard. It's where instead of the child being raised by the animals of the jungle, it would be raised by ghosts. It's $1 million idea, right? I mean, anybody can see that at first blush. Did he run? Did he say, that's it, get off your tricycle, I got to go home and write this book? No, he put the idea away for 20 years. And he said this in interviews. He said, I knew that I wasn't writer enough to write that book the way I wanted to write it. I was going to wait until I was ready to write it. And he did. And I think it was 20 or 25 years went by. So just know that you can put your masterpiece aside. You can put all your desires to do super fancy constructions. And, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, actually. But you can put your masterpiece aside for now if it's not bearing fruit, if you're really not ready for it, if it's beating you up, if you've been working on it for years and see, what happens is it's preventing you from growing. It's preventing you from starting something new, dealing with it, starting something new, dealing with it. The learning is in the work. And if you just get stuck in that one project, you're slowing yourself down. So don't be rigid. Don't be stubborn. Trust that you will have many ideas in your lifetime, and maybe save your masterpiece for when you're at the peak of your powers. That was number 9. Is everybody okay? Everybody's okay. I don't see anybody putting tear emojis yet in the comments. Nobody's crying yet. Okay, good. Phew. I'm going to continue because number 8 is a rough one. I'm almost afraid to say this. I hope you're not going to get mad at me. You're imitating mediocre writing. Oh, did she say that? Yes, she did. Now, here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of not great writing in the world. There just is. Is that a bad thing? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. As my darling mom used to say, there is a lid for every pot. Sometimes I like to read something that's just like a straight up, genre beach read. It's not intended to be great literature. It's just pure entertainment. It goes right down. I like to read books like that sometimes. Sometimes I like to read the classics. In fact, quite a lot do I like to read the classics. Sometimes I like to dip into something that's dense and literary and ambitious, and I love to read those books as well. So even one reader may have an appetite for all different kinds of things. That's good. But here's the problem. If you choose like the not terribly focused on writing craft books, and you say that those are my role models, those are the ones that I'm going to imitate, that's the type of book that I want to create myself. You're not going to have a sufficiently well-developed ear to be able to write at a level that is going to allow you to write simply and well, right? If you aim for rudimentary and that's your skill set, then that's what you're going to have. If you aim for really understanding writing craft, really understanding story structure, then you get to decide what sort of book you write. I hope that makes sense. Now, I'm going to put myself on the spot here because this was a kind of a big thing to say. But I want to describe to you very quickly what I mean by mediocre writing, because mediocre it's not a very nice word, right? And maybe I should have chosen a different one, but it's basically writing that's not striving for excellence. It's okay being mediocre. It's not doing it to insult anyone. It's just literary excellence is not the goal. And one of the hallmarks of this type of writing, there's a lot of hallmarks of this type of writing, but one of them is that it's basically just in two dimensions. There's a main character who's doing whatever that book is about, and some of the book takes place inside the main character's head, and some of the book takes place where the main character is just interacting with other characters. And the book sort of toggles between inside the head and outside the head, and you can tell a lot of story that way. But it's two-dimensional, and really good writing is I made a list actually, and I would say at a minimum 5 dimensions. There are 5 dimensions I want to see in really good writing. Now, this is a really interesting topic, and I'm going to pinky swear that I'm going to do a whole live stream about writing in 5 dimensions because I just think that there's a lot to say about it. But I'm just going to give you a taste right now. In dimensional writing, you've got to manage the passage of time in a much more sophisticated way than in a two-dimensional tale. You have to think about the setting, not just as what's outside the character, but as a symbolic dreamscape of story where actually it's telling story as well. You have to be intentional in your use of setting. You have to understand a concept that I teach in the Path of the Storyteller program called narrative distance, which is you are not inhabiting the same distance from the narrative all throughout. That's going to take a while to explain, but for a little example, a little taste of what I mean, you know what it looks like if you're watching an old sitcom and it's on a little stage set and they've got a camera sitting right out by the studio audience, and the whole thing kind of takes place almost as if you're watching, right, a little play. All classic sitcoms were shot this way. They don't do it so much anymore, but just a classic sitcom shoot versus a really magnificent film that's cinematic, that has cameras cutting in close, moving back, capturing landscapes. The visual interest and the dynamism of the movement is completely different than those little static 3-camera shoots on the old sitcom sets. That is the difference that I'm talking about when I talk about narrative distance. It's a whole other thing, and it's a hallmark of really good writing. And the 5th dimension, time, setting, distance, and embodiment through the senses. So anyway, let me not get too waylaid by that because we definitely need to talk about that. But there is a lot more to writing fiction that's striving for excellence than that just kind of the bare minimum that it takes to tell a story. That's not what you should aim for. And I can tell sometimes when I see somebody offer work that is written at this level, and I ask them what they read, and they tell me, and I'm like, got it. That's what you've got going in, so that's what's coming out. So it can hold you back. If you're not reading work that strives for excellence, your best is not going to get into the realm of excellence. All right. So that was number 8. Number 7. This is one that comes up so often with students, and some of you are here today live, so this is going to sound a little familiar. I've really been thinking about it a lot. Number 7 of my list of 10 things that hold writers back is that you are playing it safe. You have some kind of fears that are making you play it safe in your writing. Now, we all have fears because we're human beings and we're vulnerable, and that's beautiful. That's great. Our vulnerability is wonderful. But if your response to your own vulnerability is to try to hide the truth of yourself, then how is that going to lead to the kind of emotionally authentic, engaging, high stakes, psychologically accurate stories and characters that truly please the reader? You can't play it safe. You can't hide behind your security blanket and just let your hands come out and write a daring, novel that doesn't expose anything of your own heart. It's not going to have heart if you don't allow your own heart to get exposed. Does that mean that you need to put your personal autobiographical drama on every page of every work that you write? Well, no, of course it doesn't mean that. You very likely are here because you write fiction. I write fiction. You may write memoir, and people who write memoir have a whole different relationship to the subject of personal exposure. So we'll let them talk about that. But even in fiction, you are exposing so much of yourself. You're exposing your worldview, you're exposing your feelings, you're exposing your preoccupations. You're inevitably going to expose something of your values in how the story goes. And you can't have it both ways. You can't write a story that's vivid and powerful and full of feeling and gives your reader a really satisfying emotional journey if you don't want to go there yourself. So playing it safe. And listen, I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic. It feels scary to go to go public. Let's just say it feels a little scary to go public with stuff. But hey, it's fiction. You're making it up. You're just making up a story. So it is like I was going to say play therapy, and I don't mean to be glib about things like that, but it is a kind of a form of working your feelings through an imaginative transformation, and and that may well feel really good to you. It may end up feeling really good to you, and we cannot control how our readers are going to take it, and that's just part of being a writer. We do the work as best we can. We put it out in the world. We really can't fully control the reaction, but that doesn't get you off the hook of being just authentic and putting your heart into your work. Number 6. Well, this is a big one. It's a little bit related to number 7, but it deserves its own number. And this is number 6 of my top 10 things that hold writers back. You are too nice to your hero. You don't want to put your protagonist in hot water. You don't want to put obstacles in front of your beloved main character. You're just too nice. Now, it's the truth of life that we don't like bad things happening, and we certainly don't wish bad things on the people we love. We don't wish bad things to ourselves. We want the wind at our backs. We wish that to our loved ones. We want their paths to be free of obstacles. We want it to be smooth sailing. That's what we wish. That's a good thing. Fiction is not real life. Now, the shape of story is it's made of obstacles. That's what it's made of. And that's very unnatural. But guess what? Art is artifice. It's not supposed to be natural. When you sit down to write a novel, you are inventing a whole universe. You're populating it with made-up characters. You're putting words in their mouths. You're sending them on challenging missions, right, that are designed to change them from who they were into who they end up being. there's tremendous psychological accuracy at the core of that mission. At the core of that shape, I should say. The story structure replicates something really profound and true and enduring about what it feels like to be human. But we are compressing all of this into just a little ball of light. We're just compressing it into a ball of story energy and handing it to our readers and saying, go, have a great time. So it's not natural. It's the question of what we would want to happen to us, or what we would want to happen to someone that we liked, is not the right question. The question that we must ask for our hero is, what's the next worst thing that can happen? That's what we have to ask. We have to say, what do they want more than anything? And how many obstacles can I put in their way? This strikes many writers as shocking. When they finally get it, it really strikes them as shocking. Like, how could that be? But if you think about the books you love, you will recognize right away that this is how stories work. It's how they are. It's what they do. There's nobody who can go through a fantastic, meaningful journey of transformation by being comfortable and staying comfortable and ending up comfortable. We will only go outside our comfort zone when pushed. And guess what? Every time we get outside our comfort zone expands a little bit. And so the next time we need to get outside our comfort zone, we have to be pushed harder, further. That's story structure. It's not just obstacles. It's obstacles that escalate in a pattern that has meaning, that develop your protagonist in the particular way that they need to be developed for your story to be the story that you have in mind. So you're too nice to your hero. Why is this so? I have a feeling that there's a little connection, between my earlier advice about not thinking like a reader, thinking like a writer. It's almost like there are three people in the room when we're writing. There's the writer, there's the hero of the story, and then there's a reader who, while we're writing, is an imaginary reader, right? Not as imaginary as our main character, but our main character probably feels realer to us in those writing days, in those early days. We have to make sure that those three entities are very distinct in our minds, that we, the writer, are thinking like a writer and doing the writer's job, that we have enough objectivity and distance between ourselves and our protagonists that we are not giving them the experience that we want to have. We're giving them the experience that the story demands they have. And then we keep the reader in mind, right, by doing all kinds of other things with care, with tremendous care, so that the reader has a terrific experience. So being too nice to your hero is a big one. You're a nice person. You can be a nice person and be a good writer. There's nothing wrong with that. But just know that when it comes to your storytelling, it's all about making life rough for your hero. That was number 6. Number 5, you're not reading enough. Now, this rings a little bell with my earlier advice about imitating the wrong kind of writing. But if you're not reading the category of book that you're writing, chances are you're not familiar enough with the genre to be able to pull it off successfully. Now, I see this sometimes when I have students who come to me and they say, well, I'd like to write YA, young adult, books published for teen. A lot of people want to write YA because it's very popular genre. It gets made into television shows and movies, sells a lot of copies. The advances tend to be good if you manage to be, lucky enough to have a book that gets picked up by a publisher. It's a thriving category, and it has been for a while. And I say, oh, like, what do you read? Who are your favorite YA writers? And it turns out that they don't read YA at all. Like, it's just not their thing, but they want to write in it. I'm like, that's holding you back, because what's going to happen is you're going to write a book that you think is YA and it's not YA at all. And what are you going to have at the end is a book that has no market. It has no clearly defined reader. There's sort of no place to go with it. And it sort of breaks my heart sometimes when writers will go to conferences and say, I pitched my middle grade novel to an agent. I paid a fee so that I could have 10 minutes with an agent or an editor and pitch, but they haven't even yet decided. And they get asked, like, well, so what is the book? And the answer is like, well, it might be middle grade, it might be YA, it might be. It's like, it's not. It's one or the other. You have to sort of know what you're aiming at if you're going to hit the target. Similarly, adult fiction, there's book club fiction, there's literary fiction, there's all kinds of ways to talk about types of books, and mostly they have to do with who you think the reader is. And if you haven't thought about that, it's possible that you're writing a book that just is going to fall through the cracks. That will hold you back, because you may well write a book that pleases you, but there's no reader for it. There's no place to go with that book. So that will hold you back. It will hold you back career-wise, because you will have spent a lot of time writing a book that is not going to do anything for you. It's not going to launch your career because there's no market for it. Okay. So that was number 5. Let's move to number 4, which is one of my favorites, I have to say. And it comes up for so many of us so often. Number 4 on my list of top 10 things that hold writers back: you're afraid of simplicity. You don't trust being simple. And that shows itself in a variety of ways. It can show itself in a kind of addiction to very fancy language, very flowery sentences, very complicated prose style. You could be really hooked on that. It becomes like a meal where it's, imagine Thanksgiving dinner where everything is dessert with whipped cream on top. It's too much. Like, at that point, you don't even want anymore. It's too much. Every sentence does not have to be a cannoli with whipped cream on top. You need to trust clarity, and you pull out the fancy stuff when it's needed, when it's merited by what you're trying to communicate. So language is a place where a writer's distrust of simplicity can manifest, but structure, oh dear, structure is another place where a mistrust of simplicity can show up. And so what happens? A writer comes to me and they say, I have this book I'm working on, and it's got, get this, 5 different viewpoint characters. 3 of them are in the third person. Well, one of them is in the first person, and the other one switches, and it goes backwards in time, and it tells the story of 5 generations of the same family, but one of them has amnesia. So it turns out that everything at the end we discover that she said was made up. So it's got an unreliable, and I'm like, my head is swimming at this point, right? Every trick in the book, they want to put in this book. They're so interested. Oh, and it has footnotes. They're so interested in all the tricks, right, that they feel like that's going to captivate the reader, because it's like a puzzle to them to do. But that's not what captivates the reader, is it? What captivates the reader is a character that we love, or whom we find compelling, fascinating, who engages us, that we will go on a book-length journey to find out if that character gets what they want, gets what they need. Those 2 things may not be the same thing. What they want may not be what they need, but it's the shape of story to deliver both, right? So if storytelling engages the reader, why do writers get caught up with throwing in all the tricks? They may be intellectually ambitious, but underneath that is either a unexpressed shame that their writing is not impressive enough. They feel like they need to do something that's going to just hit it out of the park, dazzle everyone. People are going to be thrown back in their chairs with mouth hanging open when they read the first chapter, right? That's who are you trying to impress? Who does that impress? That actually doesn't impress anyone. That's not what your reader is coming to you for. Your reader is coming to you for a story. And a story works really well if we know who the main character is and we know what they want and we are deeply engaged in taking the ride with that main character so that we too can find out, do they get what they want or not? Do they get what they need or not? So the fear and mistrust of simplicity. Now, let me let me take a sip here. Good, hydrated. So now we're up to numbers 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to continue our countdown. I hope everyone's still okay. Good. All right. Very good. And most of you have hung out with me all this time, which is amazing. So we're in the home stretch here. So number 3 of my top 10 list of things that hold writers back. Well, I just was alluding to it. So without further ado, let me say it. You've written a book in which the main character has no mission. What do I mean? You have never decided what the main character wants, and you've written a book-length work in which the main character wanders from incident to incident, looking for something to do. This is so common, my friends. I'm laughing, not because I think that it deserves mockery. I'm laughing because it's so common. It's like a habit we all have to break. We have to trust that the main character has to have some purpose, a goal, an objective. It has to mean something important to them. And everything they do in the book has to be in pursuit of that goal. That sounds so basic. Guess what? It is, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do. If you end up with a passive main character, a main character who has sidekicks who are always saying, hey, look over there, or I just happen to have a map in my pocket, while the main character is like, what do we do? You haven't actually solved this basic storytelling problem. You haven't given your main character a clear, high stakes mission. What you may have written instead is a lot of description and a lot of mood, a lot of feeling, like emotional state, right? Description and mood are not a story. What's a story? A goal, actions, and consequences. The story has to lean forward towards something. Give your hero a goal. Send them on a mission. That was number 3. All right. Number 2 of my top 10 list. You don't practice. Now, here's the bit of wisdom underneath that. You cannot get better at what you don't practice. So anything that you're doing that's preventing you from really practicing is in your way. And whether that's working on the same book for 4 years, right? And so you're not really practicing, you're just kind of moving the deck chairs around, you're rearranging furniture, but you're not really practicing anything different. You're just doing more of the same. If you are opposed to studying, if you're opposed to writing craft on principle, and I'm going to guess that if you're here listening to me, that probably doesn't apply to you, but it's a commonplace. And I know you've probably heard it because I've heard it a ton, that people say, well, you either have it or you don't. Writing, what a gift, what a talent. Or the only way to write is by writing. You just need to do it. And the more you do it, the better at it you'll get. Now, let's invite the common sense fairy in for a second. If you're doing something wrong, the more you repeat it wrong, the better you'll get at doing it wrong. Right? I mean, it's just common sense. So you cannot get better at what you don't practice. And so when I say you don't practice, I don't mean that you don't write. It means that you're not writing with an intention to improve. Practicing. That's what practicing means to me. It means, and I was a musician as a kid, so this is a very specific word to me. When you practice a piece of music, you're not just playing it over and over again. You're practicing it until you get to the part that you can't play, and then you stop. And then you look at that part and you slow it down and you figure out what you're doing wrong, and then you do it right slowly, and then you do it right again and again and again and again until it becomes easier to do it right. Then you do it at tempo. Then you go back, you play the piece again, you get to that part and you can get through it. And then guess what? You get to the next part. That's how musicians practice. This is how we must practice also. We are writers, we are artists. We are engaged in a very complex artistic endeavor. Writing a novel is complicated. It's a complicated ambition. You have to learn to do it the same way somebody has to learn to play a concerto, piece by piece, with training and practice. Okay. Now, some folks will dive in and read all the craft books, and you've got a shelf full of writing craft books, and you don't implement anything. You're grazing on a lot of talk about writing craft, but you don't actually stop to practice it. Okay. And that, someone who can quote all the writing craft books but who hasn't actually changed something in their writing is in a state of denial. Like, they're in a state of a kind of resistance to changing what they're doing. So that's it. That's my number 2. You cannot get better at what you don't practice. And now look, it's time for number 1. You cannot finish what you don't begin. Now, again, I know that this might not apply to those of you who are already writers who are known to me, who are in the Path of the Storyteller program. But there's a lot of you out there, maybe watching, on the replay, that are so curious about writing that you have a feeling in you that you wish that you could write. Maybe you've recently gotten to a place in your life where you finally have time to write. You used to have excuses, and maybe they've changed now, and the kids are in school, or the kids grew up and left, or your life has changed in some way, and now you have time, and your excuses were really useful, right? Because they maybe kept you for years from actually sitting down to try to write. But as your excuses fall away, why aren't you? Why aren't you writing? Right? You have all kinds of reasons. All of us have all kinds of reasons, forms of resistance that make it hard to just get in the chair and begin. And you have to take care of that resistance first, because nothing else can happen until you take care of that. You have to get in the chair, open up a document on the laptop, or take out a notebook, take out a pen, and write something. Writing is writing. It's not talking about writing. It's not reading about writing. It's not criticizing other people's writing. That's definitely not writing. Okay? Writing means that you practice what you preach. You put your bottom in the chair and you get to work. So that is my number 1 on the list of top 10 things that hold writers back. You can't finish what you don't begin. We got through my list of 10. Give me a moment. I am going to look at the comments. Oh, Terry, I'm going to bring your comment up because I think people are going to find it relatable. So this is from Terry in the comments. And I believe, Terry, that this is about practicing, right? And you share, I don't know how to practice. Other arts I have pursued, the practicing is clear. Sing it over, play it over, say it over. How do you write it over? How do you write it over? Writing it over is the easiest thing in the world, Terry, I'm so glad that you share that. It is really relatable. I do think that many people who are on the path of development as writers know intellectually that revision is the thing that they're supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to revise, but they get to the point where it's like, okay, time to revise. And the truth is they wrote it to the best of their ability the first time, right? Like that was what they had to offer. And so now when someone says revise it, it's not like they all of a sudden can put away their first draft level of expertise and replace it with the revision level of expertise. They're still the same person. They still have the same level of expertise, right? So you go to revise and you're like, I don't know what's wrong. Right? I don't actually know what I'm being asked to do. So I'm wondering if that's part of what, what you're expressing here, but we have to learn how to revise as part of our training as writers. We have to have a technique. We can teach ourselves to be really master writers, pro level writers, just by writing by ear and just recycling our own untrained, kind of naive approach over and over again. If we just practice that approach, that's all we're ever going to have. So we got to level up. We got to level up. We have to not only learn writing craft, study it, get mentored about it, but we have to implement it, and we have to have the courage to implement it and find out, as we inevitably will, that we haven't gotten it yet. We haven't fully understood it yet. There's a danger in all kinds of learning, and I think this will be my last point, that we can fall into black and white thinking, I kind of either or thinking, and that we can say that, well, I tried to learn it and I don't get it, so therefore I'm done. How many hours of practice do you think it should take someone to gain mastery at something as complicated as writing a novel? Ask yourself, what is your expectation? Reset your expectation into something that's reality based. It's going to take a lot of practice. And if I were here doing a weekly live stream about how to get into Major League Baseball, and I told you it's going to take many, many years of practice playing on little league teams, travel teams, farm teams, minor league teams, major league teams, you're going to need a lot of coaches. You're going to have to put in the hours. You have to swing that bat so many times. You would nod and say, that's right, because that's what it takes to play in the big leagues. You wouldn't argue with me. I know you wouldn't. It's true on the face of it. But when it comes to writing, we don't bring that same reality-based perception. And so we are the 8-year-old on the little league team. We swing the bat once, we miss it, and we're like, that's it. I'm done. That's all I know how to do. Right? If you were the caregiver to that kid, you would give that kid a pep talk. You would try to help them understand better what it takes to become good at something. And the ones who stick with it, they're the ones who are going to improve. All right. So that's it, my friends. I love that you were all here. Thank you so much for hanging out in this live stream. If you're watching the replay on Facebook or YouTube, you can post comments below, ask questions. I will answer them. Or if you have any thoughts to share, I would love, love, love to hear them. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a solid. Please subscribe to the channel. And if you found this content of benefit, give it a thumbs up so that we know to do more for you like this. I will make a promise to do the future live stream that I talked about, sort of dimensional writing. I think that would be really interesting. So we'll put that on the calendar. But if you've got something you want me to talk about in a future live stream, come at me with it. I love to hear what's on your mind. I love to hear your ideas. I'm going to say hi. Oh, Kelly here. Thank you so much for being here, Kelly. Sarah, I'm really glad you're here. Now, I can see that we've got a lot of folks right now. It's November doing NaNoWriMo. And this is a really great encouragement to just, put down your judgment, get in the writing chair and make something happen. So come hang out with me every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, NaNoWriMo people. All right. We're going to offer some tips, and you're going to be part of this great little community of writers, and will help keep you in a good headspace, help keep you focused so you can meet your goals in November. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoyed this talk and I hope you did as well. I'll see you next week.